So welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Just a quick explainer with our football editor, Mark Douglas, to look at the ongoings over in the Gulf. The Gulf Corporation Council took place this week, and the blockade, which had seen Qatar essentially outcast by Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, is coming to an end. An agreement has been signed, which means flights can now take place. The sea and land borders also open. And lots of intrigue, Mark, on what it might mean for the Newcastle United takeover, given that Qatar and Saudi Arabia have been at each other about the disagreements over piracy, the World Trade Organization dispute. In your view, I mean, this can only be a positive, can't it, that these relations have thawed and the blockade is over?
Absolutely, yeah. It is. We don't know exactly what impact it will have on the takeover yet. It's still very much fresh information. It's new things that are developing, but I don't see any way that it can impact negatively on it. The biggest thing I think in the summer was clearly TV rights. We talk about the PIF needing to solve the question of who's actually in charge. And that was obviously in the end what the Premier League said was the big issue and what they offered arbitration over. But there's no doubt in my mind that the TV rights were the biggest thing. If you have a potential owner of a Premier League club accused of being involved with piracy on a whole, an industrial scale of TV rights, then that has to be the biggest issue. So Qatar were always going to throw their weight around in this. It became a bigger geopolitical issue. If you take that away, if you basically start to get to the point where Qatar and Saudi Arabia are once again talking, the legal threats or the legal cases, actions that are between the two countries go away. You can start to get beIN Sports being turned on again in Saudi Arabia. You can start to talk about whether some compensation is paid to beIN Sports for their for the losses that they incurred as part of the piracy. Then we start to move into the realms of, look, this could change the situation. This is potentially a game changer for the Newcastle United takeover, because it removes the big issue of one of the Premier League's biggest commercial partners being at odds with potentially one of the clubs. So I think, potentially, not yet, but down the line, if we start to get agreements, beIN Sports is turned on again in Saudi Arabia, then yeah, I think it could potentially have a big impact. It could potentially loosen some of the problems around the takeover, and what you would need then, I think, if that happens, is then for a nimble strategy by the people involved in the consortium to kind of look at different ways in which they could resolve the issues that stopped it in the first place. To me, it feels significant. It feels like this could be the start of a new approach, a new way of doing things. And you've got to remember, like, if there was this was not a deal that was, supposed to be blocked. Premier League have always maintained that the top 6 clubs were not a problem. They did not oppose it. They say that the issues were procedural issues that could have been solved. So then that becomes a real test, doesn't it? If some of the issues around Qatar are removed, and yet they have to take another look at it. I mean, to me, it feels like, I think I don't overestimate it. Sorry, in terms of whether it's actually going to be the first thing that's going to be solved. It feels like, if you're talking about things in the background being significant, this has to be one of the biggest things that's been a problem. If Qatar and Saudi Arabia are at loggerheads, then and beIN Sports is obviously Qatari owned, then that was always going to be a big problem. If they can come to an agreement, if they drop all the legal threats around it, which I think they probably will, I think it certainly removes some hurdles to the takeover happening. It doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly gives it a second chance. And I think that's all that we've ever kind of wanted to see. And when you speak, and that's not just me kind of saying that's what I think. It's also, there's 2 or 3 people that I've spoken to who seem to know the situation around the Gulf quite well, and one, in fact, who kind of knows the situation with Qatar and Saudi Arabia in terms of sport really well, and they're all saying the same thing. So it can be resolved. We've always said it can be resolved. It just felt the other week when the beIN Sports got the contract for the MENA rights again, it felt like, look, if Saudi Arabia doesn't change, this isn't going to change. But this has opened the possibility for Saudi Arabia changing. So, it does, in my opinion, make a chance again. And I know that the people around the deal think the same. So, you never know. You never know.
You mentioned there just how far up the agenda it might be. I mean, there's talks that this, will impact on situations in Iran and Yemen and all this political stuff. So there is that question of just how far up the list it is. But on the other hand, it's probably relatively simple to say to beIN Sports, you can now broadcast legally in Saudi Arabia. So it could be, relatively quick. On the other hand, it might be relatively slow and not that far, up the agenda.
Yeah, I think the issue of beIN Sports getting turned on again in Saudi Arabia could be resolved really quickly. I know beIN Sports are kind of aware of it and think that there is a possibility of that happening. But you've got to think that there's still issues around it after that, because there was supposedly a court case, wasn't there, where beIN Sports were found guilty of breaching Saudi competition laws. So, there's no doubt in my mind that those things would probably take a bit of time to resolve. You'd also got, I think at the time in the summer, beIN Sports were kind of saying, well, we've had to lay off staff, we've had to restructure our operations because of the piracy issue. So they might be looking for some compensation as well. They might be looking for different ways of doing things that way. I think politics over in the Gulf and the way that things work is very different to how it works over here. So I can't kind of proclaim to be an expert, but it feels to me like if the right people say get it done, it'll get done. That seemed to be what happened in the summer with Newcastle. The right people were saying, yeah, we want it to happen, and it sure enough, it sort of almost did happen. So I think it could be solved pretty quickly, but maybe the issues around compensation and things like that take longer. I think the priority for them in the media war would be Al Jazeera, wouldn't it? Which I think seemed to be one of the reasons why the blockade happened in the first place, because they were a lot of the regional allies or regional competitors of Qatar took a lot of offence to the way that their affairs were being reported on Al Jazeera.
I mean, suggestions that they might drop legal action. I think the word was freeze legal action Qatar against Saudi. So that would mean the World Trade Organization dispute over piracy. The WTO say they've not heard anything yet and they can't comment on whether it will be halted. But just finally, Mark, I guess given how ferocious that was, just what was it, February, March time, and a lot of harsh words were said. I mean, and to go to the WTO was a big thing as well. Of course, Saudi then appealed it. Relations really did take a dive. They were already very bad at that point. And then to be at this stage, though, first couple of weeks into January, it's amazing. And we're not experts in, Gulf relations, but looking at it, it's astonishing that we're at this point where them two are now talking. They look like they're on good terms, or about to be anyway, or the foundation for that. It surely has to be a positive for Newcastle United.
Yeah, I think if you kind of read what people are writing about, the reason for all of this is, obviously a new president in the White House who's going to have a very different view of foreign policy, and Saudi Arabia kind of, I think they know that Biden won't be necessarily predisposed to them as maybe Donald Trump was. So they need to they need to be in a different position. So absolutely bizarre, isn't it, that an election in America could end up having an impact on Newcastle United. It's very much the football club that we cover. It's very much the football club that we kind of know and sometimes love. That such weird things would happen to it, but there you go. And yeah, I mean, look, as I said in the review of 2020, I think that Newcastle United needs a fresh direction. It needs new owners. It needs new energy. It needs new money involved in it. It needs a totally different way of looking at the football world. And, and that's why I've always kind of wanted this takeover to happen, because I feel like it would do that. It would give real impetus to the football club. And if this deal happens, then I think there'll be a lot of Newcastle fans kind of who are feeling pretty gloomy about lockdown, finally feeling there's something to be positive about in the world after a pretty tough year.
There we have it. Thanks, Mark, for sharing your views on an interesting couple of days in the Gulf. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk, where we'll keep you up to date with all the latest developments there and everything to do with Newcastle United.